presentation is all about the non-traditional stakeholders and the role that they play in developing air services within the African continent. So we've got a really interesting lineup of panelists for you. And the moderator for this is my very good friend Martin from Grant Thornton. So Martin and myself, yesterday, we were actually at the University of Cape Town, along with Rolls-Royce, with Sabina, who you've already met from Intervistas, and Refilway from Women in Aviation, if she's here, and a couple of other speakers. And basically, what we like to do at AviaDev is we like to do some form of outreach as part of leaving a legacy of putting this event on. So we managed to get about 50 students that were studying mechanical engineering, either at master's level or undergrad from the university, and we put on an afternoon of a mini program. And the reason we do that is I get inundated with requests from people saying, I want to come to your conference, but I'm a student, can I have a pass? And of course, it's a B2B conference, so that's hard. So what we do instead is we put the effort in to actually bring the conference to them. And that's what we did yesterday, and there's been some great conversations as a result already. Martin was one of the people who gave up his time. Again, he's a great supporter of AviaDev, and we've worked together over the last few years doing similar sessions. But this one's super exciting because it's very non-traditional, and what we're trying to do is change the paradigm here, change the narrative, and I'll leave it to Martin to speak to you a little bit more about it, but please welcome Martin to the stage.
Thank you very much, John. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've now nicely refreshed, caffeine starting to kick in, and we can have a good session. Before I start, I want to do some marketing and punt. John has already alluded to it. It's the product that we've got in your delegate bags. I'm not going to talk a lot much about it. All the information is there. I'm the guy that you want to talk to once you've read this and you're looking to take it into action. So now with my salary paid, I would like to welcome to the stage, in no particular order, my panelists. We're going to keep this informal, and we're going to keep it to first-name basis. I've got agreement with my panelists. I don't try to pronounce their surnames if they don't try to pronounce mine. So, with no particular order, Xavier from Air Namibia, if you can please come up and join us. Calling on Chris from the African Travel and Tourism Association. Please. Take a seat. Welcome. Tony from South African Tourism. And then last but not least, John from Tsogo.
Thanks.
Welcome. Now, today we're going to be talking about the role of stakeholders in developing air services. And we heard this morning in terms of the model that Cape Town has followed in terms of developing their air services. And what we are looking towards my panelists today is to talk from their perspective in terms of the development of air services. Each one of them come from a specific area, activity, sector. So they've got a unique perspective in terms of how they fit in terms of the development of air services. So my first question is going to be, and I would like to start on the furthest part in terms of with the airlines, because sometimes people feel that in terms of developing of air services, the airlines' role is quite obvious and so on. But I would like to ask you, Xavier, in terms of how do you see the airlines' role in developing air services from your perspective? What do you feel in terms of should be incorporated? And what that link is then with other stakeholders from an airline perspective.
Thank you. As we saw from the previous presentation, the stakeholder community is quite large. Every one of those role players is key to make sure that the whole value chain is maintained. Now, we as airlines are the ones who come to make the whole thing work. We are the enabler in terms of moving traffic from point A to point B. We cannot fly to a destination if there is no infrastructure in place, obviously. So there is a lot of other people who would have done the groundwork before us. So what we do is we have to collaborate with other role players, be it the airports, the tourism boards, to make sure that whatever we engage into will be viable and self-sustaining and value-adding. So without the air service provider, I mean the guys who do the actual flying, the whole value chain is
absolutely
is
very
incomplete.
important.
Yeah.
Chris, in terms of from Atta's point of view, in terms of your membership base, a large portion of that, tour operators, products, and so on, how does that tie in terms of the role that association play in terms of with your members and in the development of air services?
Well, as the association, we are essentially connecting the tourism providers on the ground with the tourism source markets. And ultimately, without the right flight connectivity, there's no product on the ground, because you've got to be able to get your tourists, your visitors, quickly and easily to the destinations that they want to go to. So it's vital that all parts in the chain are able to actually talk to each other, work together, and understand what the goals and aims need to be to develop those services.
Absolutely. And then coming to Tony, in terms of South African tourism has been involved in terms of the Cape Town Air Access Initiative. And some people might ask in terms of from a national level to get involved in terms of what might be seen as a local initiative, your reasons for getting involved as from a tourism body, tourism promotion body, on that kind of a level.
Well, from a DMO perspective, I mean, we play a central role. We create demand in markets. Now, what is important is that, the key word is collaboration and partnership. So the work that we do in markets, actually we have applied a hub and spoke kind of a structure, whereby we have a number of offices globally. Yeah. And those offices are servicing a number of countries from Europe, Southeast Asia, Asia markets, Americas, and the continent. So it's very important that how the airlines are operating in terms of the hub and spoke and bringing through tourists from a number of networks, across globally. We operate in the same level, whereby now how do we create demand? But what is key for us is the sustainability of those routes, because once airlines are opening up new routes, then the key thing is to sustain them. And how to sustain them is to create demand in markets. And I mean, even though we do have numbers currently, but we have to increase those numbers. I mean, currently we're really looking at expanding. We have a target of about 5 million extra visitors by 2020, which means we have a target to work towards. Yeah. And without the enablers, then we won't be able to reach that. But of course, there are many other role players who are also part of in the mix.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of those role players, John, if I can come to you, is in terms of you're part of the product, large quantity in terms of rooms, particularly in Cape Town, and your role in terms of from a product point of view, people on the ground, bums and beds, your role in terms of the development.
Yeah, we've heard the speakers this morning talking about the growth of the tourism industry in Cape Town and also in the Western Cape. If you look at the amount of rooms that have been added, B&Bs, Airbnb, it's been great and wonderful, and that is why we could fill these planes now coming to Cape Town. But if one looks at the great work that Wesgro, Tim Harris, and the team has done, I would say just copy and paste that going forward, because I think one of the major decisions or positive decisions that was taken was that to include private business. And we as Thornton is obviously a sponsor of the airlift program, but to wait for government and to wait for other administrators to make a decision on that, I think that Wesgro took the ball, ran with it. The airlift has been an amazing result with the amount of flights and the amount of passengers coming into Cape Town. And our business is all about volume. So if you don't have the occupancy, whether you're an Airbnb or hotel or a bed and breakfast, it's not sustainable. Yeah. And there is winter times in Cape Town as well, if you talk about May, June, July, and August, where these additional passengers coming into Cape Town is a huge positive for us.
Yeah. Xavier, in terms of these kind of initiatives, I know that a lot of the times the airlines take the initiative, but do you believe, and in the Western Cape, for example, the government, Wesgro, has taken the initiative as well in order to start these collaborations. In your experience in the rest of Africa, who do you believe should be taking the initiative Should it be a collaboration like we've seen here in the Western Cape? Should it be the airline? Should it be private sector? Should it be government sector? Who should kick it off? Who should take a leading role?
Yeah. Thanks. Ideally, it should be a combined approach with a shared risk formula in place. But what you find on the ground is the airlines are normally approached by the airports authorities, trying to entice us to fly into their markets. Often, they don't do any concrete and substantive feasibility studies for us to just pick on. So when we are approached, we have to start the studies from scratch, which costs money, takes time. And you find a lot of other players on the value chain, they don't really participate actively until when you start flying. So it would have been much easier if it was coordinated, perhaps a central point like the Tourism Association, the airports authorities, and many other service providers to the value chain, such that everybody is contributing and investing in the risks that are going to be faced by the operation. So a new route starting from scratch will take you easily 2 to 3 years. So often you'll find that the operating airline is the one that has to foot the bill and make the losses for 3 years, while everybody else is already benefiting from day one. And that is one of the things which is actually preventing the acceleration of development, because airlines often don't have the resources to sustain losses for 2 to 3 years. But if everybody else came to the party and brought their fair share, airlines will be encouraged to accelerate the process of introducing new routes, increasing frequencies, and.
Yeah. Because, John, in terms of the Western Cape model, there was actually the private sector involvement. There was money contributed in terms of getting the process going from the private sector. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. There are many private people or companies that were approached. I think we have about 5 or 6 currently that is the sponsor of the airlift program. And I think as we go forward, when they see the benefit, and all business should see this, whether it's the red bus, whether it's the restaurants, whether it's the hotels, whether it's the shopping centers, once they see an increase of volume of feet into the Cape, I'm positive that they will see how positive it is and what they could do about it. Another positive for the industry is when you have an air crew staying in your hotel and you see these immaculately dressed people in your foyer having a welcome drink or a stack, that certainly is very, very positive to be seen by the other guests also staying in the hotel. And as you know, the airline has some very strict rules and regulations to be able to qualify as a hotel to accommodate the air crew. So that in itself also is a big plus for us.
Chris, from an association point of view, convincing members in order to make that kind of commitment. Do you believe it's happened in other areas, but in terms of looking at where your membership are, is it possible in order to convince them, to get them involved, to go about it, for them to play their role within the whole air development?
Yeah, I mean, very much so, because the way that the associations run is the volume of numbers and the voice that you've got there, and understanding that if we all can get involved in something, and the model that Westgrove have used for the Cape Town Air Access is absolutely fantastic, because it's that volume of numbers. We all get together and we can all benefit from that increased traffic, increased passenger numbers. As John was just saying, with everyone will benefit, everyone along the supply chain, be it the day trip providers, restaurants, just absolutely everyone within the community.
Yeah. And Tony, from a South African tourism point of view, you guys do a lot of research in terms of your general activities anyway. Is there scope in order to utilize that research to provide the examples, the benefits, in terms of what these potential routes could be, provide background information, all of that? Are you contributing that to the initiative, and how does that play into the whole development?
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. When you look at, I mean, before you even venture into any market, you do your thorough research in terms of, the scope of what are the interests of the market, and what sort of the scope you have in that market in terms of numbers. What is important is that, once we have created that environment, then we bring that into the table, because our role that we're playing is to ensure that the demand that we're creating, it's able, the service providers or the experiences on the ground are able to, to provide what is demanded out there.
Yeah.
Secondly, I think from our side as well is to ensure that when we do awareness drive globally, we know that we're competing with many other destinations, and the cost factor, it's an issue. But also, how then do we drive this awareness is to ensure that on a regular basis we drive, hosting programs for tour operators abroad to come and have a look at the destination, to have a greater awareness of what is the product on the ground. So through partnerships like your accommodation and services on the ground, we are able to create itineraries just for educational purposes. And we share, the costs amongst ourselves. So at least we are able to even spread the risk and then the responsibilities across. And there's no other better, education than people experiencing your destination, personally, rather than just on brochures or the amount of work that we do internationally. So it's very critical. And I think, as I've indicated earlier, for me, what is key is sustainability of the routes. Because then you create more demand for that. So it's very, very important. So the research plays a critical role, and we share that amongst all our role players in terms of where they should be playing. And and the airline as well. I mean, we share that information, through different sectors.
Because, Xavier, sustainability of routes, not only for the destination, but as well as for the airline, extremely important. Now, in terms of developing sustainable routes, from an airline perspective, what do you need in terms of from other stakeholders, in terms of what are the key things that you would need in order to go into the destination and make sure it's sustainable, and that kind of support?
The stakeholder cycle, often we look at the people on the ground at the destination origin, but it's quite wider than that. You have other people like the aircraft manufacturers, you've got people who manufacture engines, who are not visible in your market. What we have seen is those people are more active in supporting airlines to be sustainable. I'm talking about the aircraft manufacturers. Obviously, their interest is for the clients to be healthier, to grow so that you can buy more airplanes for them. So there's kind of an interest for them to see airlines becoming sustainable. So the contributions we get from them is mostly in the areas of skills, training, and also assessments in terms of feasibility studies, cost reduction strategies, and many other critical factors which are needed in order for you to be able to sustain yourselves. The airline business is very costly. Margins are very thin. We saw on the slides earlier that Africa as a region is still below zero in terms of profitability. So it's about who are those role players who will help develop traffic, increase demand. At the same time, how are you going to reduce your costs and develop the manpower capabilities and skills to be able to run a viable business proposition? It's not really about hosting an event and giving freebies out. It's about those things which will be part of the foundation for the long term.
I want to link a question to that is in terms of, because sometimes what's being talked about is incentivizing an airline in order to fly to a destination. And sometimes, in some cases, once the incentive runs out, the airline stops flying. Now, in terms of that kind of a model, is the scope for that? And I'll ask the question to the rest of the panel as well. But I want to ask from an airline perspective, is there scope for that? Is it reducing the incentive over time? What takes the model from an incentive model to a sustainable, fully commercially sustainable model?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you structure the incentive. One of the rules we introduced 18 months ago, I think they had a very good incentive program, whereby it stretched over a period of about 3 years. And if you pull out during the grace period or even 2 years post the end of the incentive period, you have to pay back. So that will ensure that if you operate for 5 years, for example, the incentive that they have given you, they will have recouped it. And the greater economic benefits to the community would have been realized.
All right. Chris,
So I think the one important thing is to find a way of making other role players also contribute. Those who are just sitting by, waiting to cash in. What we've seen is in our business as airlines, almost everybody is profitable except for the airline themselves. So we need to find a way of how do we... It's like the story of a tick and a cow. The tick sucks the blood from the cow until the cow is dead. So how do you remodel that?
Chris, in terms of following on from that, in terms of from a more association perspective, in terms of what do the association need from the airline, and in terms of also what then can be contributed around this, we talk about the incentive model. Is there other things in terms of marketing, et cetera, from a product level that can be done?
I mean, the key to that is the stability and the long-term plans. Ultimately, from the association perspective, and especially from the tour operators internationally, they want to know that they can put certain programs together, use certain flights to ensure that that product all sits well together, and that they've got that continuity of what's going to be happening over the long term. Businesses put their programs together 2 years in advance, so they've got to have the lead-in times. They've got to know what they're going to be able to sell, and they're going to have to sell that confidently, so that they can actually get behind it and support it to ensure that there's the volume there, to ensure that it's profitable and sustainable.
Yeah. And John, would you agree with that from a product point of view in terms of the need for certainty, and also how long that period might last? You know, how long would it need to take in order to build up that sustainability? Is it a 3-year period? Is it necessary to be there for longer in order to establish in the market?
Yeah, I think it's up to the tourism industry, like I said earlier on, to make it successful. You know, to do those packages is to understand what is required to get those flights full coming to Cape Town. You know, Cape Town, you know, people don't say, we're going to America anymore, we're going to New York. People are starting to say, we're not going to South Africa anymore, we're going to Cape Town. And we just find that with the current downturn that Minister Windley spoke about earlier on, you know, it's a temporary little hiccup that we're finding, and I think it's like a 12 to 15-month deferment. But in the next 18 months, Cape Town will be back as the top destination to visit. So Cape Town in itself, the role players need to work very closely with the airline to ensure stability going forward, whether it's the package, whether it's maybe they're too expensive or certain providers are not doing what they should be doing. So it's a collaboration of working together as a team and ensuring the success of that flight coming into Cape Town, into the best airport in Africa.
There we go. Tony, you agree with that? From a South African point of view, you've got more of a overhead view in terms of looking at all of the stakeholders, airline, product, the trade, everybody involved in terms of that, the role that they need to play in order to make it, what you need from them in order to make it sustainable?
I agree totally. I mean, when you look at the support that we provide to air services like Cape Town, Durban, Johannesburg, basically what you're doing, for airlines and the work that we're doing is to also, you know, even at the launch of any airline coming through for a new route, it's about creating a long-term marketing plan, because you need to be able to sustain that by, you know, continuously marketing the destination, but through joint marketing agreements with the airline and their holiday, you know, some airlines have got holiday, you know, sections, whereby now you ensure that you are part of that supermarket, you know, on the shelf. And but how do you then push the awareness? Is to make sure that the route has got its own dedicated, you know, marketing. Yes, there's work that we're doing, you know, constantly where we market in, you know, in markets and so forth. However, you always have to sort of highlight this airline partnership, because you know what is the bigger picture. You know, it's about sustaining that and also attracting more visitors. But it's definitely the support from a national DMO is to make sure that, you know, we support through special packages, special marketing packages for that route.
Okay, the final question before I throw it open to the audience for questions. So if you'd like to start thinking about your questions you'd like to put to the panel, I'd just like to ask, and maybe it seems like an obvious question in terms of what are the benefits that you would like to see from the air services development? And, the first thing would be sustainable routes, the money aspects and so on. Xavier, is there anything else in terms of that from an airline perspective that you would like to see in terms of that kind of development? That's kind of collaboration, other benefits that could potentially be realized, or is it about the money at the end of the day, particularly for airlines?
Yeah, one needs to look at the objective of having established that airline. On the continent, you find that a lot of airlines are government-owned, primarily because the private sector has not come forth to fill that gap. So the purpose of having that airline is really beyond the profit that you should be getting. It's more about the service that you have to render in terms of the greater socio-economic benefits to the community and to the region and to the country, which is necessary and should be supported, because if that vacuum is left unattended, the economic growth of that nation or region will be below where it should be. Yeah. We also find that even within a commercial route network, there are certain routes which are what we refer to as public service obligations. If you look at our country, Namibia is quite a huge country. So if we don't have air service within the domestic market, communities in some of those areas will be completely isolated. And some of the basic services that are required, like medication and even government presence, education, will suffer. So our role is really beyond the profit motive.
Right. Chris, from an association point of view, obviously if your members are doing well, the association is doing well?
100%, yes. If they're doing well, their businesses are doing well, we're doing well. It's from our side, it's about creating those right connections. That's what the association is there for, connecting the suppliers with the buyers, and that's where the aviation industry is vital to this, because it puts that link in the chain. But a lot of tourists generally don't necessarily want to go to just one destination. So the development of new routes and sustainable new routes that are at the right time is perfect. I mean, it's now very, very easy to connect East Africa with Central Southern Africa with South Africa, all on one trip.
Yeah. And is there also, in terms of benefits, Xavier mentioned that some of the routes might be obligation initially, but in terms of with the collaboration with the tourism industry, it becomes a commercially viable route.
Yeah.
With new destinations, linking to what you said now.
Yeah, with new destinations, especially in certain niche tourism markets, not high volume, but it can be very high value tourism. And it's connecting and opening up those new destinations and broadening the industry.
Yeah. Tony, from a national point of view, in terms of the benefits of these kind of collaborations?
Oh, certainly. I mean, we are the beneficiary of, air access. So I think for me, all we want is bums on beds. And what a better way, for us to collaborate and make sure that it even goes beyond just tourism. It goes beyond, investment. It goes beyond, product development, because the more numbers we see, it means now we have to develop more products, or we have to look at other enhancing our current, product scope. So it's really, the benefits are enormous when you look at it from a, long term. Tourism plays a major role across spectrum. I mean, we can never underestimate the value of what tourism is bringing. But by beginning to really bring in, partners on board, and everybody seeing the role that they're playing is very crucial in terms of us growing this. It's very important. I mean, we will continue, working in that space, making sure that we create awareness. Where there's no, awareness is less. We will continue sustaining where we are doing well. But of course, if we all win, then ultimately the GDP of the country and the MEC, there, he's able to even, present results that are favorable for the GDP contribution. So for me, I look at it from a better, from a bigger picture, especially job creation as well, which often we don't look at, but it's ultimately it gets there.
Yeah. Because a couple of key objectives of SA tourism is also in terms of geographical spread, length of stay, spend, additional, and all of these are then benefits that flow from such a partnership.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at also other sectors that are contributing, you look at events. Often events are looked at it, isolated. But when you look at events, events create that, they close that gap of seasonality and geographic spread, especially if these are the events that are really bringing footprint into a destination. So we look at how then do we stimulate the demand or stimulate tourism aspect within those events, is to really work with airlines to say, airlines, can we, during this particular time, work on specials around the events, and then we speak to, the trade partners to say, how do we create packages that are going to sell that particular event? When we go abroad to lobby for big events as well, it's about joining hands and saying, while we bid, we also, providing sort of a value proposition for those associations to bring their events into South Africa. So those are the things that we look beyond just our normal leisure marketing. So there's the bigger real economic impact when you look at it from that sense. Yeah.
And John, all about bums on beds?
Absolutely. I just want to confirm what Tony has just said. If you look at the Sevens rugby tournament, for example, that takes place here in Cape Town in December, I mean, every single year, we have seen an increase in international people coming to join that Sevens tournament. It's between 6 and 7% of international people coming to Cape Town and making it into a 4 or 5 day stay. The amount of doubles in terms of business people coming out and people just getting together in groups. We are dealing with SA Rugby now for December this year. And with DHL, the amount of interest that has been shown just with that one event in particular has been absolutely amazing. But then also all the other events in Cape Town. We get together, we sponsor some of the major events. I mean, we have the Quebec Tour de France team coming every November, staying with us. The Two Oceans Marathon is growing. The Carnival is growing. The Jazz Festival is still very popular. So all those events that we are working on as a collaborative team, we've had incredible success. And with more accessibility to come to Cape Town, you can't just get into your car and drive down for a weekend. You need to fly to Cape Town. And with more seats available on the aircraft and more accessibility to this wonderful destination of ours, it certainly is going to bear fruit going forward.
Absolutely, because the events become more sustainable because of air access. Okay, I'm going to throw it open to the audience. I do hope there's roving mics in terms of the questions. We've got roving mics, so please feel free to raise your hand and you can ask questions. All right.
Done a great job.
Yeah. We've either bored you to death or we've done a fantastic job. Personally, I'm going with the second option. So I would like to say thank you very much to my panel in terms of your time and your insight. And thank you very much to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.